Okay, a very big welcome to Pennine Ham and a very big welcome to Martin M1MRB of the ICQ podcast, who's going to give us a talk shortly on his experiences of building the QRP Labs QMX Plus transceiver. And I'm also delighted, apart from the visitors we've got in our meeting tonight from various parts of the QRP community across the UK and Europe and North America. Also very pleased that we've got Hans Summers, G0 UPL, on the meeting here tonight. And I'm sure Hans will be very happy to take part in any questions and answers in the meeting afterwards. So very pleased to see Hans again tonight. So the meeting tonight is not really a surprise to any of us. We know that Martin and the ICQ podcast group of people are very, very keen on talking about developments in amateur radio, encouraging all kinds of new things that are going on in amateur radio and giving them a platform. So it's no surprise that Martin has got his soldering iron out and had a play with building the QMX Plus transceiver, and I'm really looking forward to his talk about it. I've read a lot about it, I've heard a lot about it, but I haven't tried to do it myself yet, so it'll be good to hear Martin's experiences. And even a greater pleasure to have Hans Summers at G0 UPL here tonight. I'm one of those that got into amateur radio as a teenage boy. My dad was my tutor, really, playing around with valves in the first instance and getting into amateur radio at a very young age. It wasn't until my 20s, actually, and that was in a period when there were a number of people who started to launch kits for building small radios, transmitters and receivers based on very simple designs. And I got into that at that time. I've still got some of them in the shack here that I've had for the last 40 or 50 years. So really, really good to have Hans here, who's taken those developments to a completely new level with the opportunities we've now got with the computer processing power, which we can now have very powerful at our hands inside our equipment. So Martin, without any more ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully we'll get it to work. Share the screen. Yeah, okay, come on.
Has that come up for it?
Has it come up?
Not yet. I'm just going to change it to mean that you can do it. Should better do it now, Martin. Just try it again.
Let's have another go at sharing the entire screen, and we'll share it. It's saying cancel. No, it's not. Share. Okay. And then I'm going to bring up the presentation. Guys, I know Hans is in the audience. Hans has seen me do this once before. He was invited to the Sutton and Dream Club meeting, and let's say Hans did this with us. Now, I don't quite know. I'm not. Hang on, it's gone awry on me. It wants me to stop sharing. Right.
That looks lovely at the moment. You've now got the full screen without any of the controls on it.
Yeah, I've got you set for full screen on mine so you can see it all. Yeah. So, as I say, I thank Hans for joining us. I've known Hans for about 25 years. I was instrumental in getting him to come and do a talk for Sutton and Cheam when he lived in the UK about 25 years ago. That's when I first met him. And we've kept in touch over the years. However, Hans knows that I tell it like it is. And he sat in on my last chat on this one. And I'm glad you're back today, Hans, because we can both ask questions. If I couldn't answer them, or you can answer them better than me, that's good. Okay, building the QRP Labs QMX Plus. Okay, well, I decided that it was a lovely radio, and I've been talking to Hans about this. And then I had a birthday in August, just after we came back from Friedrichshafen. And the family got together and decided I was getting one of these for my birthday present. So a lovely birthday present arrived. Now, I'll take you through it because I wanted to talk about how you build it, because lots of people went into panic mode when I talked to them about it and before I did the talk at the club. I don't think you'll be in panic mode at the end of this. Okay, so what is the QRP Labs QMX Plus? Well, it's a multi-band transceiver. Yeah, you got it in 160 meters through 6 meters. And I believe you can set it for 11 meters as well. So just be aware that it's a very versatile receiver. It's not just CW, but you also get SSB and digital modes. So with a lot of QRP kits, you only get CW. Well, if you're an SSB person like me, that cuts you a little bit out of the fun. I have the fun building it, but I don't have the fun operating it. Hi. Okay, you can purchase it as a kit, or you can purchase it fully built. Now, if you purchase it fully built, it costs you a little bit more money, but doesn't charge that much more for it. But there is a waiting time, because there's a list of people who want them fully built for them. So, quite honestly, I think you'll have more fun building it yourself, and you'll get it a little bit quicker, more than likely. Okay, so what do we have to do first? Well, this is the starter. Read the funny manual, RTFM, then reread it. There's a lot of really good information within the manual, and I found it quite informative. Now, the build manual is 64 pages, and then there's an extra 20 pages of winding the toroids and transformers. So, in fairness, 84 pages. And you're going to think, well, do I really have to read those? Well, I would suggest it's well worth the read, well worth the time. Okay, I would suggest working at your own speed. It's not a race to get this done. In fairness, I remember going back many years ago when another member of the club and I bought the Ellie-Craft little 20-watt auto tuner, the portable one. He built his in 2 hours. I took about 4.5, 5 hours, something like that, to build mine. Mine worked, his didn't. He spent ages. So what I'm kind of saying is, sit back. It's not a race. Build it at your own speed and enjoy the time. So as I said here, relax and enjoy the build in a quiet environment. Obviously, a cup of tea or coffee would aid the build. I wouldn't suggest anything stronger, because you do need to keep your wits about you, but it's enjoyable to do it that way. And I said here, I'm not going to show you an unboxing video of me taking the PCB and the components out of a box that Hans sent me, because that would be boring. Trust me, it's good. So your first decision you've got to make is what voltage you're going to run it on. So the QMX Plus can be built to run on 9 volts or 12 volt operation. Now, bear these two numbers in mind as I go on, and I'll label this quite heavily as we go through. Either of these voltages should not be exceeded, because if you go above those voltages you've set your PA to work on, you could damage the PA transistors. So 9 volts means 9 volts. 12 volts definitely means 12 volts, not 13.8. Now, I label this, but it is important. This graph, oh God, sorry of this. This, Alexa, stop. Sorry about it, Nick, you might have to cut that out. This graph shows the winding of the power transformer, and the 3-to-1 winding, which is in red, 3-to-3 rather, winding in red, shows that if you run it at 9 volts, you get 5 watts out. The blue winding, which it says if you run it at 12 volts, you get 4 watts out. I've spoken to Hans about this. He said that since this graph was produced, there are some caveats that we can change on that. But we'll come on to talking about which voltage is the best one to go with a little bit later. So there's my working environment. I was on the kitchen table, the old-fashioned 70-year-old multimeter, nice soldering on, some solder, a nice cup of coffee. I did grab my anti-static device and got ready to start building my QMX. So first thing I would do, and it's worth doing this with any kit you get, is always check you've got all the components before you start building. It's the best idea. I didn't have any problems with the components from Hans's kits. They were all, it was all there, and I was perfectly happy with it. But in the past with other people, sometimes you're missing a resistor or a capacitor, and you get almost completed and you find you're missing a capacitor, and you then got to find one out your junk box, or if you haven't got one, then you've got to purchase one or argue with them that they didn't send it to you. Check you've got all the bits so you know that when you start, it's going to work through and happen for you. Okay, I sort the components into various compartments, so I knew what I had, checked them all off, and then you're not going to build the whole thing in one day or one go. So what I suggest you do is you pack the items away that are not needed. So you don't want to scratch the front panel, for argument's sake. So pack the front panel away and the back panel away, and the display and things like that, so they're ready for when you want them. And I had the back components to build the main PCB, so that's when I started with that. So there's my little box of bits and pieces, little compartments. Doesn't look much in there, does it? But it's all sorted, ready for me to do it. One of the things I will say is, and we'll come on to this when we talk about winding transformers, Hans gives you a lot of information about winding the toroids, but he's not mean about the length of wire he gives you. In the middle right hand side, there's a coil of wire for winding the toroids. He's not mean about it. If he says cut it for 24 centimeters, you cut it for 24 centimeters, you wind your toroid, and you probably find that you could have got away with, say, 22 centimeters, but do it as per the manual. So first off, check the main PCB. Now the main PCB comes with surface mount components already soldered for you, but give it a good wander over, have a good look, make sure there's no damage to the board, because it could have got damaged in transit. And just check it over. And there are some components that are on the back, as I'll show you in a minute. You also need to check the reversion of the board you've got. In my instance, mine was a reversion 3. Earlier versions, as Hans will tell you, version 1 and 2, you had to solder a lot of the capacitors in the low pass filters. Today you don't, so you're okay on that. I believe Hans is now up to revision 5, although when we spoke about it the other day, there's not a lot of difference between a version 3 and a version 5 board, so don't panic. If you've got a 5, just smile and see yours is newer than mine. Hi. Okay, there are components on the back of the board, as you can see, and that was the main PCB. So the first thing you got to do is install the 12 switching diodes. And these are just little straight diodes. You put them on to the PCB, you solder them down correctly in the right place. And as long as they're correctly installed, you're not going to have any problems, and you've got plenty of time to check your solder joints and make sure they're good solder joints, one for another.
Is that you? That's my timer.
You okay? Sorry, somebody said okay. Okay,
yeah,
there's my.
Fine, Martin. If whoever that was, if you wouldn't mind just muting your system, just so we don't get any noises in the back. Yeah, go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, okay. So there's my board with my diodes on. You can see it. It's not a difficult construction. You just solder the 12 diodes on, have your cup of tea, and move on to installing 8 47 microhenry inductors. Now, they're lovely devices. You don't have to wind these. You just install them onto the circuit board. Now, when I show you the picture, I didn't obey my own rules in that check you've installed them in the correct position and with good solder joints. And I like to make sure that they're always the same way round. It doesn't matter electrically, but when you're fault finding, you look down, you read the values of them all the same way. Unfortunately, I didn't do one of mine, as you'll see in a minute. But there you go. This is something you don't have to do. I was just playing with my my LCR meter and testing one of the 47 microhenry rather inductors. You don't have to do this. It is not required. Okay, there's my inductors across the center. The one on the left is installed the other way round. So the yellow bars on the right. If I'd have installed it the other way around, that would have been uniform and I'd just read them all the same value. But it all works. I don't know why I missed it, but I did that way. So all I've done now is installed 12 diodes and 8 inductors. Dead easy. Okay, we're now going on to installing the PA transistors. So the PA transistors, there's 4 of them. They're FETs, BS170 power MOSFETs, and use anti-static facilities. All right, I use my anti-static strap. If you haven't got one, just find something that's earthed. Just find a good earth, and with a bit of wire, and hold that bit of wire while you're soldering them in. That's just to double protect and make sure you drained any static electricity off you. Now, the note here, the washer, which I'm going to show you in a minute, is not a heat sink. Its purpose is to hold the transistors flat on the board, and the printed circuit board is the heat sink for the transistors. So there's the 4 transistors bolted down. Nice little washer, holding it all in place. They're all soldered in, and we're ready to go. We've got our FETs in. Next thing is, I'll show you how I measure the wire for toroids. You might have a better way of doing it, but I tend to lay some masking strip on a work surface or a table, and then I mark the lengths from the left. So I'll say 0 centimeters. If the first one's 20 centimeters, I mark along the line, mark off 20 centimeters, then mark off others as you go along. I find this is an easy way of measuring lengths of wire when you're actually trying to do this sort of thing. And so I will lay them along there and then just cut them at the right length. Now, that looks like a horrible picture, but the top is showing you the 0 mark, and the bottom is showing you they should be one long piece of tape, but there's my 20 centimeters and 24 centimeters. So when I come to cutting it, it's already measured out. Okay, using the transformer manual, we cut the correct lengths of wire for the transformers we're going to do, and then we need to twist them together and install them into the binocular toroid. Don't worry, it's not difficult, honest. You need to test and identify the winding before installation. So you come out with a number of windings, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. And then once you've soldered it into the board, there's some test points on the board you can actually measure from that proves that it's actually installed correctly and it's actually connected across to where it needs to go to. All in Hans's manual, nothing difficult about this. So there's the start of the winding on the left, and that's what you end up with on the right. and you worked out that the P's all connect together and the two S's that connect together, and then you're a very happy bunny because you've wound this this PA transformer. And let's say takes you more than a quarter of an hour. You know, it will be under a quarter of an hour to do it. You're not in a rush, so enjoy. And there's mine installed on the right hand side, just above the big washers holding the PA transistors down. So you install it on the board, lovely. So we're cracking on quite nicely. We've got quite a few components in now. Next, we start winding the toroids, and this toroid is the first one you wind, and you can see there's not many windings on this toroid, and as long as you count the windings as you go through, every time it goes through the center of the toroid, that's one turn. So as you're winding it, and as I say, I keep coming back to this, Hans's manual tells you the best way to do this, and then read it. And trust me, it's worth doing it that way. There's some more of the toroids wound. So we're now up to, what, 6 toroids and a transformer I've wound. And you might say, that's enough for a day or whatever. You stop and start when you want. It's, as I say, not a race. Okay, we're now going to move on to creating the bandpass filters. And once again, there's quite a lot of toroids to wind on this, but you only have to count the windings. So the assembly manual tells you cut this length of wire, wind it onto which toroid, and the toroids are different and all the same. They're different colors and bits and pieces, but they're all explained in the manual. So you cut the length of wire, you use the table, you wind it on, and you install it in the correct place. And the top, you can see, what was it, 12 toroids in the bandpass filters. So yeah, I'll be honest with you, I did all in one day. I sat back, I did a bit, then I did some other bits and pieces, then I came back. But as you can see, so the third group in are blue toroids, there's a yellow toroid on the left, there's some pinky ones on the right. This is all explained in the manual. So all you do is wind them onto the correct toroid. Okay, then you've got to wind and install a triflower transformer. So you cut 3 lengths of wire and you twist them together. Now, some of you say, well, how do I twist them together? Well, I used my little battery power drill and put the 3 wires into the chuck, and then I anchored off into a vise the other end of the 3 wires. And don't pull the trigger right in quick because it will, you know, go off at a loony speed. But on a trigger drill, you just trigger it and it'll wind them nice and tight for you, and you'll get a perfect winding on them. So, but you wind them as per. And there's my the triflower winding of this little transformer. And once again, once you've got them out, you've got to find the three windings. So there's an A winding, a B winding, and a C winding, and you set them out in correct before you put them into your board. Installing it, well, install it as per the manual. I sound a bit of an old fuddy-duddy saying this. Check the windings are correct before soldering. So once again, make sure you've got the A winding in the right place, the B winding in the right place, the C winding in the right place. And when you're happy, yeah, and they're in the holes, in the correct holes, solder them up, and that's that little job done. You've now got to wind and install transformer T507. You cut the wires exactly the same as per the manual, and you wind the binocular core. Now, when I show you a picture of this, it looks a bit horrifying at first, but let me explain. It's not that difficult. Test and install into your board. So you test it, make sure you get it okay. Now, there is it on the left, and there's the windings on the right. If I tell you that winding B and winding C are just one piece of wire that go through the middle. You're really only winding on A and D. So that's all the winding part. The other B and C are part of this, and this particular transformer is used in the VSWR operation. So if it spots you've got high SWR, the receiver shuts off rather than letting you burn the PA transistors out. Once again, there's mine, the tri-flower near the bottom, 2/3 of the way over, and the SWR coil up there, toroid. So now we get on to fitting the rear sockets. Well, the aerial socket you've got to fit. These little audio jack controllers you've got to fit. You've got to also fit the power connector. Now, Hans does say in the manual, have a look around the USB-C socket and make sure it looks okay. It should be okay, but this is just a double check. I've had no problems with mine. I would suggest you won't find any with yours, but it's worth having a look. But that's the back. So the antenna socket's in, and a couple of the audio jacks are in, or jacks for other bits and pieces, and the power jack. Right. At this stage in a build, you need to fit a link between two pads on JP501. For some reason, I missed this, and I'll be honest with you, RTFM. I missed a line in the manual, and as a result, my receiver was totally deaf. And I found it back and said, well, no, I've got an open circuit antenna socket, and I was about to write to Hans and say, oi, my ball's faulty. And then I reread the manual, and sure enough, it said, put a link in. Now, that was my fault. I found it back. I thoroughly enjoyed finding it back, but I shouldn't have had to. If I'd have read the manual properly and fitted the jumper, once fitted this little jumper, the receiver burst into life. Oh, it was really good. So this is in the manual that Hans gives you. Just a bit from it, showing where T507 is. Above it is that little jumper. It says jumper wire. Now, this is a tip for you as much as it would have been for me. When I printed out the big manual, I printed it out in black and white. So it's a black and white printer. I would suggest do that, but if you've got a tablet or something, just double check every now and again as you're going through, because that's nice and red. I would have spotted that jumper should have been in place, and it wasn't on mine until I put it there. And you have to solder it in. But as you can see, there's where you wire in the SWR transformer, and it shows you where A, B, C, and D go. So just a thing, that was my fault. Okay, main PCB connectors you need to fit on the front. So you fit these little plugs. These then plug into the front panel when we built the front panel. This board to me looks horrible because I thought I had those two sockets square on the board, and you can see they're slightly parted at the front. Didn't make any difference on my build, where it was only after I'd soldered all the wires in I realised. But you have to build this little audio board and paddle board that you put wires through those holes in the back and down into the main board, and this then allows you to connect either a paddle or a microphone and a set of earphones to the QMX main board. And that's it installed on mine. So the little board goes in there like that, and it's all done. So I would suggest if you're going to buy one of these kits, buy it with the GPS option. Then it's not going to cost you very much. But the beauty of it is, if you're going to do digital modes, you've got a locked frequency and time based on the GPS, so that the timing is back on with this. And let's say you build a little board. I'll show you this. There are only a few parts on this little board, and it comes with a GPS antenna as well. It's well worth the option. All you need to do is fit some sockets onto the main PCB, which are part of the GPS kit, and then you install a couple of wire jumpers to get power onto the GPS module. That is the GPS module. It's about inch square. You solder on the SMA connector, antenna connector, and the black pins, pins at the back there. That's the only soldering you do on that board. You fit some sockets onto the main board, and away you go. And that's the GPS board installed on the main board of your QMX transceiver. Okay, so the main board's now complete, so we can move on to assembling the front panel. Well, the front panel is bolted down. There's lots of plastic nuts, and you slowly assemble it. You install the display first and the contrast control. You install the sockets that mate to the PCB board, and I'll show you pictures of that in a minute. And you need to install a battery holder for a CR2032 battery. These are as easy to find as anything. They're almost like AA cells. Not the same size, but they're as common as those if you go looking for them. It's a little 3-volt battery button cell thing, and works very well. Hands can't ship you this as part of the kit due to international regulations over shipping batteries, but they're only about £1 or £2 maximum, so you don't get upset about that. Okay, there's my little board, back of the board that's going onto the display. The white bit in the middle is the battery socket with the 3 connectors, and the control on the right hand side is the contrast control for your LCD display. You need to adjust it so it looks right. If it's too far one way, the screen's washed out. If it's too far the other way, you just see black squares. You just adjust it so that the text looks correct. There's the front of the board with the two controls fitted, and a couple of buttons at the bottom fitted, the rotary encoders there. And then you bolt them together, and we have an assembled front panel. So looking quite nice. So the final assembly, we fit the backup battery to the front of the panel. We connect the front panel onto the main PCB, and we slide the main PCB into the bottom half of the case, and we fit the back panel. And at that point in time, that's how it looks. Now, the next picture I show you is I put the lid on just to take the picture, but as I said, you've got to adjust that contrast control, so that I wouldn't put the lid on just at this point in time. I'm just showing it's finally assembled, but it does need that to be adjusted. Okay, on first power on, what you will need to adjust, well, the contrast controls I keep telling you, you'll need to select the QMX option, the QMX Plus option in the firmware. So these rigs use the same firmware as a QMX, which is doesn't have all the bands, and there's 3 different QMX versions, or the QMX Plus. You select the QMX Plus version of the firmware. If you get it wrong, you just have to go back in and reselect it again. What I will suggest is download and install the latest firmware. Now, Hans keeps the firmware up to date. Guys, don't let anybody tell you the different. There are always bugs in software. However, if you think about it, the big manufacturers often only release one firmware upgrade in the lifetime of the radio. I don't believe that's because, you know, they unless it's a major bug, they just ignore it. Hans fixes bugs as he finds them, but he's also adding more features. As time goes on, we're adding features all the time to this. So, you know, it's not a dead product. It's lots of things are happening. And that's my one powered up. Got the display on it. It was in digi mode. It was on top band, and it was using VMA A there. So it powered up and it's alive. Okay, so we go into configuration. So once built, there's plenty of options to configure it, your QMX Plus, to work the way you want it to work. As I said, if you don't buy the GPS board, you could use it to do digital modes, but you're giving yourself a lot more grief trying to do it. So, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. But the easiest way I found to doing all the adjustments, and they can all be done without a computer. So if you're somebody who hates computers, you're just going to have to do it from the front buttons. But trust me, the easiest way I've found to do this is via a serial terminal that you plug into the back of the QMX Plus. So I come back to the QMX can be built for 9 or 12 volts. Don't exceed the 12 volts if you go 12 volts. I personally would suggest you build it for 9 volts. Build the PA for 9 volts. Reason is, if you, and I'll show you how I did mine later, but if you go out with a battery and that battery, you start off at 12 volts, you've got 3 volts before you reach the lower option. So if you run it on 9 volts, you've got a bigger head before the battery dies on you. The bigger head, more you can lose voltage when this unit will stay working. Hopefully I explained that okay. So what did I do? Well, I got one of these things. I built mine to run on 9 volts, and therefore I required a 9 volt stable supply. It was done with a simple DC to DC converter. The one that I show you there, no, it didn't make a lot of noise like everybody probably thinks it should. No, it was well behaved. As you can see, you've got 4 holes in the 4 corners. The top 2 holes are earth. So you put your volt in the bottom left, and 13.8 will be perfectly okay, or whatever you want in there. And you measure the voltage at the output for that hole at the bottom right. And I suggest, in my case, I set it for 9 volts with the little potentiometer. Now, before anybody says, I'm not drawing any current. So I set it for 9 volts, then connected up the radio, and the 9 volts dropped a little bit because I'm drawing current. So I just tweaked up the pot back to 9 volts. So it's pretty stable. That little board, I think it's about £2, nothing expensive, and I put it in a little plastic box with other connectors for other devices, so that I can go out, I can run my QMX Plus on 9 volts, but at other devices that need 13.8 just come off sockets in that box that are at 13.8 volts. So that's that. As I say, the QMX only draws about 1 amp of current on transmit. Therefore, you don't need an expensive power supply. I was quite serious about this. when you go around a rally, look for an old 3 amp CB power supply at your next rally. They're actually, because they're linear, they're quiet, and who wants a 3 amp power supply these days? Everybody wants a 25 amp power supply. So chances are you'll pick one of these up for the square root of nothing. So a little 3 amp CB power supply at a rally with people are getting rid of and almost embarrassed to sell could be a really nice little cheap option. Receive mode. Before transmitting, I connected the power and the antenna and headphones onto my QMX, and I was very pleased with the reception. Yeah, the receiver works really, really well, and the audio quality to me was great for this lovely little radio. Terminal mode. Well, probably the most common way of doing terminal mode, and I'm talking about computer terminal here, is use a program called PuTTY. Now, PuTTY is available for Windows, Linux, and Apple. It's a standard terminal emulation program, effectively, and you connect your serial plug into your computer. You connect or the USB into your computer, your USB lead into the back of the QMX Plus, and away you go. Once installed, you'll be able to connect your QMX Plus in terminal mode. Your computer, as I say, connected to the QMX, uses the USB-C socket on the back of the QMX Plus. I had one minor problem, and I mentioned this because I've had problems, but you might not get them. But if you do, yeah, think. And it was a PuTTY issue, a Linux PuTTY issue on the little computer I was using. And I'll be honest with you, it was a Microsoft computer, a little Surface Go that's not able to run Microsoft Windows anymore, but it runs Linux quite happily. And that little computer didn't have the correct font that PuTTY wanted. And once I'd installed the correct font it was looking for, it all worked perfectly okay. But that was something I doubt many of you will ever come across, but I mention it just in case. So, terminal mode, once you're configured, you just tap the return key and the menu appears. Now, I'd suggest you always exit, or wherever possible, exit the menu by going to the exit option on the menu. So there's a couple of menu options, which you see when you connect your computer to it. The main menu, obviously configuration, hardware tests, you know, all those sort of bits and pieces. And we tap on it, and here we got configuration on the right-hand side, and we got audio. And if I tapped again, it would open up all the audio I can configure. There's another couple of menu options, just show you the sort of things you've got in there. There's the CW option and the AF filter option. You can see lots of things you can do. So I wouldn't, I think it's far easier to do it this way than do it on the front display. Although, as I said, you can do it all from the buttons on the front of the computer, on the front of the radio. Right, a powered loudspeaker. The QMX can only drive a set of standard headphones by default. Now, that might be perfectly okay for what you want to do. I wanted to have a powered speaker. I wanted a loudspeaker. So I wanted this, therefore I needed to find a powered speaker. Well, I could have used one of my BHI speakers, which costs probably more than the QMX Plus does. But decided against that. I thought, no, I've built this. I've gone through going for 9 volts and how I get around that. And I'm having fun putting this together as an overall package. Let's see what I can do. So I went out and I bought one of these little boards. Okay, it's a small little audio amplifier. And I fitted it into the internals inside of the case of a loudspeaker. Now, these cost under £2. If you look at it, you've got where the green wires are, I believe, are the where your speaker output goes into. The 4 pins on the left-hand side, you've got power earth and VCC. You've got mic earth or input earth and audio. What you do is you set that little volume control pot there to absolute minimum so you can just about hear it. And then when you turn the volume up on the radio, you don't overdrive this little board and it doesn't go distorted. And let's say for £2, I took an old speaker from a junk sale, put one of these in it, works perfectly okay. So as I say, I've done things just for the fun of it. I built a microphone. Okay, if you're going to do SSB, you can purchase a microphone online, not from Hans, as a couple of people sell them, and it will work with your QMX. Or you can modify or build your own. Well, if you're going to modify or build your own, you need an electric mic insert that will work down to about 2 or 3 volts. Now, most of the big manufacturer radios and use electric mics, but they require between 5 and 8 volts for the little capsule to work. You can get the ones for about 2 to 3 volts. They are available online. You just look them up. Once you get one that works at low voltage, that works very, very well because the voltage coming out of the QMX is on the 3.3 volt line. So that works very well. And what I did was I got one of these little capsules. Well, I bought a number of them, but I bought one. They're about £2 each once you spec. And then I took a cheap handheld microphone that was being thrown out in the junk, took it apart, unsoldered the electric insert, put the new one in, cut the funny plug off the end of this mic, put a 3.5mm plug on it, and I've got a perfect microphone for a square root of nothing. Sorry guys, I sound mean, don't I? But I don't mean to be. This is doing things for fun. So, okay, CW mode. Well, the QMX Plus will work with a straight key or a paddle, and it's attached by a 3.5mm socket onto the front of the QMX. If you get it wrong, if you've got a paddle and you've got the dit and the dial the wrong side, you can go into the software and change it in the software of the QMX. So don't worry, it's nothing you have to worry about. And you tell it in the software, the CW setup, whether you want to use a straight key or a paddle, and then you can test it and say you can even switch the wiring around in software if you wired it up wrong. Okay, so CW mode, I connected up my QMX Plus to a dummy load and an RF power meter, and I keyed the transmitter to make sure I got an output. I wasn't going to put it on there if I didn't have any output. That confirmed when I had keyed the key down, I had output power, and it all was working. If you don't have a CW key, sorry, go back on that one. If you don't have a CW key, as long as you wire up a 3.5mm plug with a bit of wire on it, you just short the 2 wires together and it'll put it into transmit. It isn't a proper Morse key, but all you're doing is making a connection for testing. Right, first contact on CW. Well, as I said, I don't do CW. I'm a bad boy, as Hans will tell you. I don't do CW and he doesn't do SSB. But I had worked with Julian, G4VHJ at Sutton and Sheen Club, and he made it work for me. He contacted Italy from Banstead in Surrey on 40 meters at almost 7:30 at night. on the 29th of September, a distance of 589 miles on 4 to 5 watts. So I was pleased. In fairness, I couldn't get Julian off the radio for a little while, and I took it the following week, and one of the guys spent nearly an hour and a half on it playing with it. So, and I know he's actually ordered one to build as well. That one I'm going to have to bypass because it didn't work. SSB mode. Well, I used my built-in, my home-built microphone. I connected it to the front panel, where the mic or paddle would go in, mic key or paddle in the front panel. You set up the mic gain as you would with any SSB radio. I tested the output power with my power meter. Sure enough, I was transmitting. So my first SSB contact, and I made this, bearing in mind my antenna needs to come down, needs to be fixed. It's got horrible SWR on it and all the bits and pieces. But I called from Carshalton in South London, just south of London, to Frankfurt. And on that date, that time, middle of the afternoon, 401 miles on 4 watts. So don't get me wrong, it works well. And we both got 5 and 9 reports. I was surprised he gave me a 5 and 9, but it wasn't just 5 and 9 go away. The guy spoke to me for about 4 or 5 minutes, which was nice, and gave me a proper report on it. So that was good. Digital modes. I haven't done much with the digital modes at this point in time, but I'm hoping to do a bit more when I sort my antenna out here. You can do a lot of the digital modes via cat control, and the USB-C socket on the back can be used for cat control as well on the QMX Plus. So, nice and easy to set up. The operating manual. I told you the build manual, the 2 build manuals, 84 pages. I think the operating manual is possibly about 130 pages, but I'm going from memory hands. But there's a hell of a lot in it, really interesting stuff, and stuff you won't find in other manufacturers' instructions, because this radio has built-in test equipment as well to test and configure some of the bits and pieces you need to do. So digital modes, well, they support, the QMX Plus supports FT8, FT4 and Whisper, but using SSB, you can use modes like PSK31. So there you go, that's the radio. My conclusion on the radio, well, that was me when I had it working. The biggest smile you've ever wished to see. And there you go. So that's pretty much my chat. Nick, back to you for questions, and I'm sure Hans or I can answer. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll come back to you.
Excuse me, Martin, that was extremely good. I enjoyed it, and I could see on the faces of people who had their camera on during the talk there that they were enjoying your contributions there. So really good. I've got, just before we open it up, and I'm going to just, Hans is with us, and I know, Hans, you'll be happy, I'm sure, to take any questions from people here. But Hans, do you just want to add anything on Martin's talk about that build?
There was a couple of things I made, a couple of notes, very minor things. I actually had my first SSB QSO. I don't know if I told you about this, Martin. It might have been since we last spoke. With Hannah's DL9 SCO, who is the founder of Palm Radio Keys, and they're not open for business at the moment, but a very good friend of mine. And that was a distance of 1,983 kilometers, which is 1,232 miles on the 15-meter band. My first ever SSB QSO that was not with myself, because all the SSB firmware development, I just had a 70 dB of inline attenuators to another radio, and I was talking to myself to test it. The other thing, Martin, you correctly said about the 12 volts really meaning 12 volts, but in the recent firmware release that I did a couple of weeks ago, I added a new parameter which is called max PA voltage, and that defaults to 11.5 volts. And what that means is that if you use a supply voltage of 13.8, it will no longer fry the power amplifier as it would have done. And so that restriction has been somewhat eased. And a lot of people were very happy about that, because it was kind of one of the complaints about the radio, that if you used more than 12 volt supply, you risk overheating the PA transistors and burning them out. So now you can set it to whatever PA voltage you want, independently of your supply voltage. So you could even operate down lower still if you thought you were going to have bad SWR antennas, or if you wanted to be a bit more conservative and less risk taker, you could even set it lower. So that was a very popular change. I also wanted to share one funny story. I built the QMX Plus. I hardly ever build anything, but I built the QMX Plus here, and a month or so ago. And when it came to the trifiller, you were mentioning, you got your drill out and you did that. I realized in October, the QRP Labs, we used to have everybody here in our top floor of our house, but we moved out. They all moved out to an office about 8 miles up the road from here. So I'm now here on my own, which is great. But I realized I had no drill. They've got it over there, and they use it to make trifiller wire in great big 10-meter long sections, which they share between themselves when they're doing the assembly. And so I did another method, which was plaiting the wire like you would plait a child's hair. I did that from plaiting my daughter's hair, and it actually works really, really well, because if you try and twist it by hand, 3 wires, you always get one of them which is twisting more than the other 2, and it probably doesn't create good balance. But if you do this kind of plaiting where you're just taking the outside one over and inwards, like you would a young girl's hair, then it actually makes a very nice tight twist. And then I tested that, and it produced a really good performance. So it was an interesting. I suddenly thought of that while I was going, but yeah, we've spoken before. I know you're having a lot of fun with it, and it's great to see that. And you're very inspiring with your talk.
Well, as I say, we spoke about this and after the Sutton and Sheen, but a lot of people I spoke to initially were quite worried. People, and we've talked about this, Hans, about winding toroids. There are a lot of toroids, but there are a reason they're there, and they're there for the right reason. And you don't have to wind them all quickly the same day. You don't have to rush. Just enjoy it. And as I said just now, at the start, download the latest version of the firmware. Hans is improving the firmware all the time. This is not a stagnant design at the moment.
I've got so many things planned as well.
Yeah, but I don't want to put you under pressure to tell people what they are, because he hasn't told me either, boys. It's honest. But that voltage thing, I would still go for the 9 volts personally, because it gives you more leeway in the field as your batteries are running down. The radio's still got the right amount of voltage there. But that's me. You can, whichever way you guys want to do it, really. But
Martin, what method do you use for stripping the enamel off the magnet wire?
Okay, there's 2 ways of doing it. I use just a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? The paper. It's not sandpaper.
Emery paper
type thing to take it off. I would also suggest that when you've installed a toroid, just ohms it out. In fairness, guys, you can have the cheapest, dirtiest multimeter under the sun. You're looking for a short circuit, effectively, between 2 connectors. If you see the short circuit, you know that that winding's in place. And often people, the biggest problem with Torres is people don't clean the windings off. What you can do most of the time is just clean the wire with a bit of emery cloth, and then tin it. Often you can just tin the wires as well first. Sometimes, and I can't remember, Hans, and you can correct me, whether your cable will come off by just tinning it as well.
Yes.
Pardon?
It does, yes, it burns off.
Yeah,
it is the type of wire which has enamel that burns off.
Yeah, so for the one stuff Hans is giving you, yes, you can do it that way. I was trying to remember how I did it now, Hans, sorry.
But that's the way I normally do it. I normally just get a big blob of solder on the end of the soldering iron and hold the wire in it. And that's my method. But some people prefer scraping it or sanding it or something.
Yeah. But that's just another way of doing it. And as I say, I mean, the object was, I was hoping that people weren't going to be put off at our club of building it. And there's been a couple of people that have ordered kits from your hands that wouldn't have ordered the kit before and said, oh, no, I'll wait until, wait and have it built. Well, all right, Hans makes a few pennies if he builds it for you. But there is a waiting list. And what I've kind of said is you could technically probably get it built quicker yourself because you're not on the waiting list. All right, Hans's team build them quite quick, but there is a waiting list. So
we've got 829 people in the waiting list and building something like 200 or 250 a month.
Yeah, so it's about 4 months.
4 months. Yeah, 4 months wait roughly.
Yeah. So even if it took you a month to build a QMX Plus, sitting back, taking your time, you're still going to get 3 months quicker than going on the waiting list. And you get great.
Thank you for that. And Hans, thank you for your comment there about the wire that you're using, and just, as you say, sticking it in a glob of heated solder on the end of the iron does the job. And Martin, of course, 100% was right, wasn't he? Just stick the multimeter across it, and if you've got a short circuit, then you've done it. So let's open it up to any questions, comments, contributions. There's one in the chat someone's just put in, and Martin, I think. Hans, how many builders do you employ, and how long do they take to build one?
Well, we have hired 2 new people, so we've got 11 or 12 people there at the moment. They don't all build. Some of them are preparing kits, and one lady, her expertise is doing the FedEx and TNT and DHL Express shipments and packing everything up every day to send out. We currently have 2 people who are building the Morserinos. I don't know if you know, I took over the Morserino product from Willie OE1 WKL, and they launched a 3rd generation Morserino, the M32 Pocket, at the end of September, produced and distributed by me. And we took 1,600 orders for that since then, and it has a 3D printed enclosure which we're printing, and so it's taken a huge amount of time to get through that. So 2 people are building that. But yeah, the team is 12 people plus my wife and I, and it's fair to say that the majority of those people are doing assembly most of the time. As to how long it takes around about 2 hours 20 minutes to make a QMX Plus when you have a lot of practice. And bear in mind, you know, these people have done hundreds of these, and I set this kind of threshold as an expectation for what people should be able to do based on the time it took me to construct it. And some of them can do it faster than that. They are doing things like winding the trifilar wire en masse in a great big 10-meter long length of it. They do the transformers for the PA output transformer. They thread the binoculars onto wire, and they again do an electric drill, and they do like 30 at a time. So they get some economies of scale going on. But if you know, I think, as Martin said, don't rush it. There's no need whatsoever to rush it at all, and take your time over it. But they do take about 2 hours 20 minutes for a QMX Plus, 2 hours 10 minutes for a QMX. That's kind of the average.
Yeah. Well, as you say,
But then after that, then it has to be tested and checked out, and we have a engineer doing the testing and make sure that all the toroids,
Oh, sorry, Hans, I accidentally muted you. Apologies. Can you just unmute yourself? Thank you.
I won't be too offended or anything. So after it's been built, we have an engineer who spends 5 or 10 minutes testing it, checking the power output on every band, checking the bandpass filters, seeing if any of the toroids need to be stretched or compressed, and all the tools for that are all built in. So it has its own signal generator built in that injects a signal and sweeps it across the band, or of a 10 megahertz, for example, with the band in the middle, so you can see the shape of the receiver bandpass filter and make sure that everything is operating correctly. And so that gets done as well, and then it all moves through to being packed up and shipped out to the customer. It's a big operation. It keeps me busy for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Morcerino, Hans, because our next club presentation is from Howard, who was the founder of the Long Island CW Club. And of course, they make great use of the Morcerino in the work that they do as a club. And he's going to be our next online presentation, which will be extremely interesting.
And it's great because I met Willie. He's a customer of mine, and I exhibit at Friedrichshafen in Germany every June. And he always comes over for a chat. And I said, "How's it going?" And he said he's looking to retire. He's done it for 6 years, and he's looking to retire, and he's not planning to make any more after the current batch. And we just got talking and came up with the idea of maybe taking it on. But then over the following few months, I understood it's not a static project. They're still doing lots of development on it, and they produced this pocket version. So it wasn't that I was just taking over the old version and producing what we had before. It's a new version, which is a pocket version. And they've got a lot of features like Wi-Fi and all sorts of stuff. And they're still doing firmware development. There's a guy, Harry, I forget his call name, another Austrian ham, friend of Willie's. They've done this thing in the last week or so. They call it CW Invaders, where a character comes across the screen and you have to key in that character quickly to get it to be deleted. And if it comes across all the way to the left, you lose a life. If you shoot it by keying it incorrectly, you get points. And so they've made this kind of game, like a Space Invaders game, but with CW characters. And of course, it speeds up as you go on. It's really fantastic to see that there's still development going on that thing. So it's a really nice product. But
that sounds great. That sounds great fun. I'd like to see that. In the chat, Charlie NJ7V said, "Did I hear that right? I can protect against the voltage issue for 12 volts simply by updating the firmware and changing a setting. And is that true for the QMX too?"
Yes, that's correct. Yes. I mean, that's not going to, you can't keep going up and up and up with the voltage, because sooner or later the switch mode power supply transistors are going to have had enough. At the input to the QMX Plus, there's actually a TVS diode as protection, which will start to operate somewhere above 14.5 volts or something like that. So, but what it does do is that the main risk, we came to understand that the main risk was that when people do digital modes, which have a high duty cycle, the power transistors overheated. And particularly if you've got a less than ideal SWR, which is, drawing higher current through the PA transistors, for example, those PA transistors could tend to overheat. And this was the main risk that was seen, which led to the very strong recommendation, don't use more than 12.0 volts. It doesn't mean 13.8. It doesn't mean a fully charged battery, which could be significantly more than 12, even if its nominal voltage is 12 volt. And so this was the very strict recommendation. It mattered a lot less for CW and for SSB, where the average duty cycles are much lower. But absolutely now there is this setting, max PA voltage. And it defaults to 11.5. And I tested the radio with a 1 minute continuous key down with this setting of 11.5, with the power supply going all the way up to 14.5 volts. And the power output was almost constant during that time. There was some minor variation. And this is exactly the intention, that it gives you that protection against a slightly higher power supply voltage. Yeah.
I mean, that's very good news for some of our club members who I know go out operating portable with the LifePo 4 battery, and they would be a bit concerned. In fact, one of the guys had raised that with me a couple of days ago, that he was a bit scared to use his normal battery on the QMX Plus that he put together. So that will be good news.
I mean, it seems to work very well. We've had very good feedback. I don't think you mentioned, Martin, we have a forum on groups.io with just over 10,000 QRP Labs customers on the forum. And so there's a lot of discussion goes on there, and also people help each other. There are a few very experienced people who are helping everybody. And so we've had very good feedback from this firmware release, and a lot of people were very excited, because it was one of the things that people didn't like about the radio was the fact that it was so delicate to high supply voltages. And so that has been substantially resolved now.
Brilliant, thank you, Hans. Let's go to the room then. If you want to speak, use the put your hand up feature, which is on the React part of your screens, or just unmute yourself and say, I've got a question or comment, or wave your hands furiously if you've got the camera on, and I'll try and see you. So who wants to go first? Yeah, I've got Bob, G3UDI. Go ahead, Bob.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, can you hear me?
We can. The audio's a bit distorted. If you've got the ability to turn it down a bit, it might help.
I've got some fancy stuff on my computer here again.
Or hold the microphone further away.
I'm not using a handheld microphone. Is that okay?
Yeah,
that's much better, Bob. Yeah.
That's all right. I just reduced the gain. First of all, thank you very much for inviting everybody to come to your meeting. I think it's absolutely brilliant. A very nice presentation. So thank you very much for that. I always like to talk to people in the north. I'm in fact from Liverpool originally, and I guess that several of us have worked on CW. I operate a great deal of CW. Now, I'd like to ask Hans one or two things if I could. First of all, Hans, I think that you're using a software-defined radio, of course, but you're using it using polar coordinates. I think that's what your system runs. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. You're talking about polar modulation.
Yes.
So it's a software-defined radio receiver using down conversion to 48,000 samples per second audio, which is then processed digitally, actually as a superhet with a 12 kilohertz intermediate frequency. That's on receive. On transmit, we're using polar modulation. This is the topic of entire presentations just by itself. I gave a presentation at the RSGB convention in October on this topic, which is online. There's a YouTube video on the RSGB channel. Polar modulation, very basically, you split the SSB up into an amplitude component and a phase component, and you modulate those two separately. And the big advantage is you don't need a linear power amplifier. Linear power amplifiers are always a headache, because if you look at the transistor data sheets, it's all full of curves, but what you want are straight lines. And so a lot of effort goes into making those into straight lines. With polar modulation, you don't need a linear power amplifier anymore. You use a switching power amplifier. So you avoid all that problem with curved characteristics. And because it's in a non-linear mode, you actually have a lot higher efficiency as well. So you have a lower transmit current consumption. And this, both saves your battery power, but it also reduces things like the size of the heatsink that you need. So currently, the two amateur radio manufacturers using this are QRP Labs and Flex. Flex use it in their new Aurora transceiver, which is at the other end of the power spectrum, 500 watts output, as well as at the other end of the price spectrum. So Flex and QRP Labs are doing that polar modulation. It to me is very, very exciting, and I could talk about that for hours, but you don't want to do that. Not now.
No, that's very interesting. I just want to sort of confirm that. I don't understand how it will work. I run a lot of SDR kit here, all in the ordinary XY system, and I have enough mathematical background to understand your polar modulation, I think, reasonably well. Now, I've got a different question. I've recently been using digital HF radio, which is now using a system called RAD, RADE, which is a huge advance over any earlier system. Now, I'm wondering what would happen if I tried to use it on your QMX. It's got a very high duty cycle, of course. You've got almost continuous power coming out.
I mean, I don't think there would be any issue with that. I can't remember, but I believe that there have been reports on our forum of people experimenting with this. And you essentially just need an SSB transmitter, which is what QMX is, an SSB transmitter. The high duty cycle is not going to be a problem because we already cope with high duty cycles for digital modes. In any case, you can turn down the drive level if it concerns you, and get a slightly lower power output. So as far as I know, then there shouldn't be any issue with running that on the QMX because it just requires an ordinary SSB transmitter. The fact that QMX has polar modulation doesn't alter the fact what you get out. What you get out is exactly the same, as you know, as a normal conventional SSB exciter. We also have controlled envelope single sideband in QMX as well, which is again a big advantage, but it wouldn't affect the digital modes, which are already a very high average duty cycle.
And I think you're also running with a feedback around your PA stage for reducing all your intermodulation products. Is that right?
No, that's not correct. There's a pre-distortion, but it's not a dynamic pre-distortion. So a lot of the manufacturers have now introduced pre-distortion where they're measuring the non-linearity of their power amplifiers, and then they're cancelling that out by having an opposite curve in the DSP that sends the signal to the amplifier. And there are two ways of doing this, either a dynamic real-time measurement where you're actually measuring the non-linearity somehow and then compensating for it in real time. And this is the best way to do it because in that scenario, you know, as the temperature changes or the band is different or anything in the radio changes, you're automatically compensating for it in real time. The other method, which some of the transceivers use, is a static calibration where the transceiver is measuring its nonlinearity and then applying that as a lookup table, essentially. And that is the method that QMX uses. QMX is a very sort of minimalist transceiver with just a microcontroller running everything, including all the DSP, all in software. And so there isn't really the resources to be able to do that kind of dynamic pre-distortion. The pre-distortion that's in QMX is actually only on the phase. So we've got these two channels, the amplitude modulation and the phase modulation. The amplitude modulation, the linearity of the amplitude modulator is so good already that I couldn't find any way to improve that by pre-distortion because it all happens at audio. It's not at RF. So you do this amplitude modulation at the audio level like you would on an AM transmitter. The phase pre-distortion is important and it gives you a few dB of performance improvement. And QMX includes its own self-calibration routine where you connect a dummy load and it goes through and it measures its own phase distortion. So it puts a carrier through the transmitter, and at different amplitude levels, it increases the amplitude level, and at each level, it measures the phase delay through the transmitter. And then it stores that in a table, and it uses that subsequently. So this is a very good sort of a few dB of intermodulation performance improvement you get from that pre-distortion. I personally was shocked at how good the intermodulation distortion came out at. I measure on around about an IMD3 of -35 dBc, which is a very respectable number and similar to what the Elecraft K3S and Elecraft KX3 had in their ARL lab reviews. So it does produce a surprisingly good performance, which I was very happy with that. But yes, it's a static pre-distortion in QMX.
Yeah, that's absolutely excellent. Thank you very much for that. I just would say I'm using Crisk as my own software, and we have a very similar system on that. Thank you very much, yourself and the presenter, and indeed for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Bob. And I think we've got the next person who's got a question is Jeff ON8NT. And I happen to know that Jeff he's a member of our club. Jeff has been one of the people having a go at using RADE on a single sideband transmitter, not on the QMX so far. So I know he had a question about that. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you very much, Martin and Hans, for the presentation, for the answer to the questions. And the previous intervention was exactly the question that I would ask about RADE. But I'm using RADE from time to time. I'm more or less a QRP station with compromised antennas. And I see on 40 meters that there are quite some stations using the QMX, but also the QMX Plus, and also the true SDX from the German and the Dutch guy. So I think it's possible. I think it's possible, and it really sounds excellent. So that's very, very interesting for QRP operation, because with RADE you can go down to -5 dB SNR. Then it becomes a little bit difficult to copy. But anyway, it's a good thing. But another development that's maybe something which is very recent to share is that you have now a new program, the POTA-CAT. POTA like the parks on the air, and CAT like cat control. It's potacat.com. And the guy who developed that actually gave a demonstration on a video with KM4 ACK, where he demonstrated actually more or less a QMX, not a QMX plus 4, but a QMX. And that program is actually doing some interesting things. First of all, you have all the spots from all the from PSK reporter and other things. So and you can select, for example, if you want to work a POTA station, you can select POTA, or you can select the band, the mode, and so on. Another thing that it can do is that you can use it to use it like, how do you say that, to use your transceiver from a distance. You can actually use your transceiver from a phone, from your smartphone. So, for example, if you are on a camping, you can set up your transceiver, your QMX, with an antenna, and then you go to the beach and just talk to people through an internet connection or a telephone connection. So that's a recent development, I think, which is very promising. And you can do it with a KMX, which is actually a very good deal if you look to the quality and what you can do with it. So so thank you very much for that, Martin and Hans.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, Jeff did post it internally on our group chat in our club a few days ago with the link to POTA-CAT. And I've had a quick look at it as well. It does enable you to control your radio from anywhere using a device like a mobile phone or a tablet, completely free of charge. So there's no expensive software involved in this, and looks like a fantastic way of providing remote operation of a small radio. So thank you, Jeff.
Very quick, Nick.
Martin, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly. I know I'm saying so I'm banging the drum and all bits and pieces. The episode of the ICQ podcast that went out on Sunday, 4/7/8, was an interview with Hans, and Hans answered some of the questions that the ICQ podcast listeners had asked. So you know, I'm not suggesting you have to listen to it, but it might give you another half a dozen questions you might not have thought about after this presentation. That it's actually in the podcast. That's all, Nick.
Yeah, lovely. No, thank you, Martin. That would be very useful for people, I'm sure. Anyone else with a question or comment they want to put to either Martin or to Hans while we've got them both here? Feel free. Unmute, and if that's the easiest thing to do, and just raise your hand at me. I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yes, Roger.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Thanks, Martin and Hans, for that. I've been very nervous about this coil building. So I bought some of the little QRP Labs low-pass filters last year. You can see the size of them compared to my finger. But they were surprisingly easy. So your advice, Martin, take your time and everything, absolutely spot on. That's what I found. And also, like you say, when you've wound them and you've soldered them on, just continuity check them, because there are a couple I hadn't soldered, you know, I'd soldered them in, but I had not cleaned them off properly, and it's just such a basic thing to check. So the advice is absolutely spot on. Thank you. I know you've sort of given me the encouragement. Even something as complicated as that is definitely possible. I can see it's just a bit longer. That's all. Just takes a bit longer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In fairness, as I said in the talk, when I built mine, I mentioned it to the guys at the Sutton and Sheen Club and got the response, "Oh, it's difficult, it's difficult." And I went, "Okay." So the initial presentation was done for Sutton and Sheen Amateur Radio Society, and it ain't that difficult. And the other thing is, when you build it yourself, you get so much more satisfaction because you did it. When you switch it on and the receiver and you start hearing stations coming in, you can look and go, "Well, that was me." You know, all right, Hans did a hell of a lot of work. I'm sorry, I'm not taking away from your Hans, but the assembly, you get such a buzz from it, and I just thoroughly enjoyed building it. And I've said to Hans and in this, when the software development is finished, I'm going to be disappointed because I'm not a big operator, but I'm a fiddler. I like fiddling with things and bits and pieces, and this has given me just so much enjoyment over the last 7-8 months now. So I'm as I say, Hans is not paying me to say this, honest, but I've just had so much enjoyment.
Martin, and you did point out in your presentation that the SMD devices, those complex integrated circuits and the absolutely minuscule capacitors, they're already pre-soldered on the board. And that, I don't think I'm alone in this room in saying, I do not want to attempt to solder SMDs. I must admit that. I've looked at it and thought, no, I'm not going to try. But it does take away from you, in the days when we were first using ICs in these kits, when I was playing with them over the years, when there were several manufacturers around producing these kits, it was always soldering those ICs to the board that was the bit where you were most likely to go wrong in the build, not on the coils that Martin was talking about.
In fairness, and we mentioned this in the ICQ podcast, Hans and I talked about soldering. I'll try and appraise it a bit. Don't use a silly little soldering iron. Use a sensible soldering iron at a sensible temperature. Something like 350, 400 degrees. I use lead solder still. I'm a naughty boy, I know. But the biggest problem people have is if they don't have a hot enough iron, they don't get in, get the job done, and get out. And with damaged components are often more likely to be done because you've kept the iron on far too long. I've never ever put a heatsink on a transistor leg while soldering ever in my life in the last 50 years, and I've never damaged a transistor. So get in, get it done, get out. The soldering irons, yes, some of the connections you make go to ground, and Hans will tell you it's a 7-layer board, it's a multi-layer board with lots of ground plane. So you want a reasonably powerful iron. Don't mess around with a piddly little miniature tip, something like a couple of millimeter tip on the end of your iron. get the heat, get the solder done properly, get in, get out. If you're worried about soldering, guys, there's a couple of things. Either just go and find some old rubbish somewhere and take it apart and refit the components back into a board, or get yourself something like Veriboard and some cheap components from a rally and do some practice soldering before you start. But seriously, if you've got a reasonable soldering level, unlike some of the idiots on YouTube, if you've got a reasonable soldering level, you'll have absolutely no trouble putting this together. Am I fair, Hans?
Yeah, definitely. I think a big mistake people make is they think, oh, I'm doing a modern kit, I should use a very fine, thin pointed soldering iron. But as you said, it's a 6-layer board, and some of the ground connections, they do require a bit of heat because that board is really sucking the heat out. And so if you use a very, very fine pointed tip, it doesn't matter how hot your iron is, the heat just can't get through that tip quick enough. It's just going to be taken out by the copper of the board, and you won't get a good joint. So yeah, a nice sensibly sized iron, as you said. The PCB revision now is revision 4. I think from revision 3 onwards, the capacitors are now all SMD, because unlike the QMX is the smaller version of this, and that comes in 3 different band versions: 80 to 20, 60 to 15, and 20 to 10 meters. QMX Plus covers all of 160 to 6 meters, and it's only one version. So I didn't need to have the capacitors be through-hole because they were never going to change. So we can make them SMD, have it all done at the factory. And that actually made it quite a bit easier to build the kit, because those capacitors, especially the low-pass filter ones, a lot of them had the ground pin was difficult to solder, because especially in that low-pass filter area, there are not many other tracks and traces, and so there's even more ground plane. So from PCB 3 onwards, and Martin built the version 3, so we'll confirm this, there's no capacitors whatsoever to solder at all. And so it did get a lot easier from that point, as well as, faster to build. Yeah.
I honestly, in fairness, Hans, thought it, even myself, I found it a lot easier to build than you probably would have done. And in fairness, you can, if you convince yourself it's going to be difficult, it will be difficult. If you go in with an open mind, read the manual, and as I said, I've been perfectly honest in my presentation, I made the odd mistake because I missed something in the manual, but just reread it. If you got a problem, just go back over it and you'll get there. It's all in there, and so it's not, I did it to prove it's not difficult. My presentation is not the most technical presentation in the world. It was never meant to be. It was about giving you the confidence to build it and have fun building it.
I think you achieved that, Martin. Any questions or comments to either Martin or Hans? My final call in the room, really.
I saw a question come up. I don't know if you guys can see it.
Did I miss
came
one
up at the bottom of the screen. Somebody was asking, how about the USB-C connector? Is that pre-soldered at the factory as well? And the answer is yes, it is.
I missed that one. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's one of the factory installed components. All the other connectors are through-hole components. So there's the 2.1mm power connector, the 3.5mm stereo jack connectors, the BNC connector. Those are through-hole components that you do, but the USB-C connector is soldered for you.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. That's good question. And yeah, thank you for that. Okay, well, look, if we haven't got any more questions, and this is your last opportunity or contributions people have got to make, I know in the room we've got a mixture of people. We've got people who like Martin to fiddle and play and perhaps not operate as much radio. We've got people in the room who just enjoy and love operating radio. And, the talk covers all that, really. I think I made the comment, Martin and I were talking about this earlier today, in fact, on the telephone, that, there are lots of very, very cheap bits of kit coming out of China at the moment. Some of them, in my experience, are getting there, but aren't quite there and have got some problems with them. The difficulty is that they don't provide any support whatsoever. There isn't the IO group that you've got in QRP Labs, people to ask questions. And often these developers of these kits, I'm not going to name the particular manufacturers coming out of China, they build something, it doesn't quite work. They produce a few firmware updates and that improves some things and deteriorates others. And then they give up with it and move on to something else. And I know from the work you've done, Hans, that's kind of not your model. You're very much encouraging and wanting to kind of move it on all the time and get feedback from the people that are building your kits, so you can see what you can do to improve and to make firmware improvements to it as well. So I think there is a big difference.
And I'm trying to listen to what people want from the radio. The list is very, very long, unfortunately, and I will get through it gradually. But there have been some things like, people have been using the QMX Plus for contest participation, for example, in the QRP categories, and wanted to be able to key it from NWMM program, which is very popular for contesting. I haven't ever done contesting, so I'm not familiar with it. And QMX has a built-in USB sound card and built-in virtual COM serial ports that are used for CAT control. But one of the requests was to be able to use the DTR signal on the serial port to key the radio, because that's what N1MM does. So that was also in the last firmware update, and that has been very well received by the people who wanted to use it with that logger. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm excited to develop over the coming months, and it's quite a long way from being a mature product yet. There's still lots more functionality. The program space is less than half used at the moment, so there's plenty of space for more fun stuff to go in.
Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward to update the firmware, guys. When Hans releases the firmware, you download it, you uncompress it, and you copy it to the SD card. And the next time the QMX reboots, it copies the new firmware in, and you're done.
Not the SD card. The QMX appears as a USB flash drive, like you've plugged in a USB stick, and you just copy in the firmware, and it's done. It's so trivial easy.
Yeah, that's what I really meant. Sorry, Hans.
Yeah. Some of the manufacturers have their sort of firmware update utility that you install and stuff like that. And I came up with this method because I didn't want to have to write firmware for Windows and Mac and Linux and deal with driver issues and signing of drivers and all of this stuff. I wanted something that would just work. So every computer for the last 20 years supports a USB flash stick that you plug in, USB thumb drive. So it just pretends to be a USB thumb drive, and you copy in the firmware, and that's it. It's dead easy.
I love my Icon radio, but that's one of its annoying features is the formatting it through the SD card in their particular. I've got Phil, G4UDU. Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, just only to say that Martin was saying about using an external powered speaker or whatever, but the way I use mine is I just got a really sensitive speaker mic, and the speaker mic, I just plug the speaker in only and the key for CW, or plug the 2 bits in, I got phone. Just it's something less to carry around, that's all. So I take it out portable. That is it. That is my speaker and my mic, and take the little tiny key as well, and I just do it that way. But there's more than enough audio out of that for me to use. It's obviously a very sensitive speaker device in the thing, and I just use it that way. So it was just a thing, so I just took it to bits and just modified it and just made my own lead set up for it, and that works fine.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and that's the fun.
Yeah.
What I've done with mine, you say, no, I'm not interested, I'll do something else. Well, if you do something else, it's not a problem. And but the beauty of this lovely kit is you can set it up and build it to work the way you want it to work. Yeah. So I wanted to have a powered speaker. I bought a little ball for £2. I put it inside the speaker. I could have used one of my BHI speakers, and Graham from BHI is probably unimpressed with me because I didn't, but it didn't feel, it seemed that if I'd have fitted that, used that, it would have been, I was going over the top on something, and I wanted to have something that I'd done, you know, something I was involved in getting working. So, and like what you've done, you could set yours up the way you want it. And that's the beauty of this. We're not tied in totally to having to do what the big manufacturer says. And as Hans said, you got cat control, FL rig, I think it is, cat control program under Linux that controls it. If you want to, you can do all sorts of things. It's all there. So, but you do what you want. That's the beauty of this one.
I have mine set up here. I'm using it for WinLink with a Pi 400 computer, and I do WinLink email every day with that, and I find that quite enjoyable at the moment. And I'm a very, very long way from anywhere here in southwest Turkey, but I can normally get to the Austrian station OE5 XIR, which is about 1,700 kilometers, a bit over that from me on WinLink, so I can send and receive emails every day via that. And yeah, there's so many different ways to enjoy it. I agree.
Yeah. Just say, but I know my nearly 400 miles on SSB is not mega, but when I tell you how bad my antenna is at the moment, and I just don't want to get up on the roof and try and fix it in the cold, wet weather. So I'm going to have to wait till the summer before I'm really going to have lots of fun indoors with it. But equally, say it proved it worked, and I was more than happy.
And I'm assuming, I forgot to ask this question, Hans or Martin, that you can do split. You can have two VFOs, and you can switch between the two for working DX stations running split.
Yeah. You've got a RIT control, you've got split, you've got message memories, frequency presets, all of those functions.
So there's a memory keyer built into it as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I would suggest
plug in your paddle.
Yeah, I would suggest, Nick, think of all the functions that 99.9% of radios have got, and then multiply that by 2 or 3 with all the bits that Hans has put in as well. So you can do pretty much everything with it, but the test equipment built in, and but the GPS data, I mean, it doesn't cost a fortune to add the GPS module. In fact, in fairness, why wouldn't you? You know, it's just there, and it just works so well.
One of the things I've been working on at the moment in the current firmware version for the next release is a complete virtual version of the Ultimate 3S Whisper Beacon transceiver kit, which I've been producing since about 2013.
Yeah.
And I've now incorporated all of that code into QMX in a virtual way. So you can do all of those weak signal beacon modes, Hellschreiber, slow CW, QRSS, as well as Whisper, all standalone without a PC. And the GPS is very good for that. That'll be in the next firmware release. So it's cool stuff.
Excellent.
So are you going to adjust the Whisper power right down low?
Yes, that's in there as well. Yeah. So you can choose the Whisper power, whatever you want, and that works in a similar way to the max PA voltage that I was mentioning. It uses the same mechanism, so you can set a max PA voltage of 2 volts if you want for Whisper, and it will adjust it right down low.
Okay, thank you, Adriana. Go ahead.
Yeah. Very good presentation. I liked it very much. I myself have a QMX, and it's quite a very, very nice little rig. And I have a question concerning the firmware update. I had been a little bit afraid to do the latest firmware update, but when I hear what you have told now, I would like to do the firmware update now. Is it a problem to go to the latest firmware update if I hadn't installed the update before?
No, there's no problem with that. You can go through from as many, you can jump as many firmware versions as you like. You don't have to go through all the intermediate versions. What I would say is sometimes there has been a reorganization of the way the parameters are stored in the memory, the configuration parameters, and if you go from a very old firmware version, it will realize that the format of the memory changed, and it will do a reset. And if you have things set like messages and things, that could get erased if you do a large number of firmware versions. It's also worth looking at if there are any new parameters that have been introduced. It's worth having a look and seeing if any of those need to be set to sensible values. Because when a fresh radio, you build it and you install the fresh firmware and it's all empty, it will set itself up with a set of sensible configuration parameters. But if you've just updated firmware from a long time ago and there are some new values, such as this max PA voltage that I mentioned just now, you might want to check that that's at a sensible level. Theoretically, everything should be, because I tried to put in the code that it would check the values and see if they're sensible. And if it notices anything wildly out, it will realize, she's just updated the firmware. I will just put a sensible value in there. But it's worth checking just to make sure that happened.
So I'll give it a try, I think. And I have another question. I once have built a microphone for the True SDX, this one which K6 ARK had sold as a kit. And I think it's also an electret microphone. I think this must work with the QMX too. Huh?
Yes, yeah, that should work with the QMX too. The pinout is even the same. So the USCX has a certain pinout, and some radios like the Elecraft KX3, they have the opposite pinout. So the tip and the ring are swapped for PTT and microphone. But the pinout for the QMX and the micro SDX are the same. So it should work.
So this would be great. Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's quite a great rig which you have invented.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great to see Mike and Adriana at Freaks Haven last year. Haven't been on recently, but we had a great chat when we were out there, so it was good.
Good. Lovely. Well, look, thank you very much. I think we've come to the end, haven't we? No one else has got any more questions or comments in the chat or in the room. If not, can I first of all thank both Martin for the work on his presentation and Hans for agreeing to come along tonight and just take part in this chat, and thank everyone. I hope everyone's enjoyed it as I certainly have. Can we show our appreciation in normal way, everybody, to our speakers? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And on that note, just for those that haven't been to one of our meetings before, I'm just going to say goodbye to the people on YouTube. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and it will be live on the YouTube channel tomorrow. So we're just going to shut down the YouTube presentation. And I'm also going to say good night for the end of the video. That will be the end of our video on YouTube. Just to thank Martin M1MRB and Hans G0UPL for a brilliant pair of contributions to the meeting and the discussion tonight. And like Martin said, I hope it's inspired a few people to have a go at something like this and have great fun with it. So on that note, I'm going to say good night to everyone who's enjoyed the meeting as well.